Han Meditations.
Hey guys, as you can see, I have all these journals. The link will be in the description. So go ahead and check this out, and it'll be in Amazon. Go ahead and get the book if you want to support the channel. Thank you guys for watching. Hey guys, I'm Han. This is Kelly. We are Han Meditation. We're back with another video. This video is about Jesus never claiming to be God. And that is one of the most contentious points between Islam and Christianity, where the Christians think that Jesus is God. That's what we were taught when we were growing up. And then we started learning more about Muslims and Islam. And even before we started learning about Islam, we never really... that didn't necessarily sit right with us, that concept that he is God and God alone.
And the only way to God.
Yes, and the only way to God is to believe that he is God and no one else. So let's just watch this video, then we'll give our personal opinions on it. So let's go ahead and do it.
I am firmly convinced that Jesus never talked about himself as God. And one way to demonstrate that is to line up our sources of information about Jesus chronologically. And so I mentioned earlier that we have the first three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. These are called the Synoptic Gospels because they agree in so many places in their which stories they tell, the sequence of the stories, even word for word, verbatim agreements, that everybody pretty much agrees that there's some copying going on. Somebody's copying somebody. Scholars who've worked on this since the 19th century have said that Matthew and Luke both had Mark as one of their sources. So you had Mark as a source. Matthew and Luke copied Mark, but Matthew and Luke have a number of sayings of Jesus not found in Mark. And so most scholars today continue to think that Matthew and Luke had access to some other written source of information that they call Q. Q is a group of Jesus sayings that Matthew and Luke had access to. Matthew has some materials not found in Mark or Luke, so they say, well, that came from some other sources, and Luke has some material not found in Mark and Luke, so that's other sources. Okay, so you got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but you also have Q and M, Matthew special sources, and L, Luke special sources. If you look at all of that material, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Q, M, and L, okay, all of that together, Jesus never calls himself God. All of our earliest sources. Where Jesus starts calling himself God is the Gospel of John, our last source. And so, to my thinking, you have these sources of information about Jesus. So I've just laid out six sources, 6 pieces of information versus 1. The 6 are all earlier than the 1. It seems to me completely implausible that 6 authors would describe the sayings of Jesus knowing that he called himself God and neglect to mention that part. Like that bit just isn't important enough to bring up. So I think it's completely implausible.
By the way, I should mention that you have an entire course on this very question of did Jesus claim to be God, which is available on your website. The link you can go to is bartehrman.com/godman. And that will take you to this course that you've produced on this very question, amongst a sort of wealth of other courses that you've produced. So if anybody's interested in going into more detail on this question, bartehrman.com/godman. I'll put the link in the show notes or in the YouTube description as well. People might be surprised to hear you make this claim that in all of the Synoptic Gospels, we don't get Jesus claiming to be God.
Yeah.
Is this not the case in any instance? Doesn't sort of Jesus imply that he's God at certain points?
Well, it depends how you read these passages. If you think...
What kind of passages are we talking about that people generally point to in the Synoptic Gospels, in the earlier sources, that say, well, Jesus seems to be implying he's God? Because, of course, people will want to say that, okay, maybe Jesus wasn't walking around saying that he was God.
Yeah.
But maybe doing so wouldn't have been a particularly great strategy.
Yeah.
Maybe in order to have enough time to have his message understood by his early followers and to sort of conduct his ministry before eventually being killed, if he just immediately started claiming to be God, he'd just be killed straight away. And so what he needs to do is get the message across, get the important moral teachings, which are the sort of most important part of his ministry, and then allow future generations after he died to realize the truth. Yeah, no,
that would be a plausible way to argue. I'm not convinced by it. It's what I used to argue when I was an evangelical Christian, and so I'm familiar with it. You'd have to say that the Gospel of John's wrong then, because in the Gospel of John, he does claim divinity early in the ministry, and throughout the ministry. Second thing is, it'd be a mistake to say he was covering it up so that they wouldn't kill him any earlier, because he's actually not crucified for calling himself God. His divine claims have no relationship to any of the crucifixion narratives. And so it's not that that's going to get him in trouble.
So, I mean, what is it? What is the?
Oh, it's pretty clear. When you read the trial narratives, Pontius Pilate kills him for claiming to be the king of the Jews. And that's a political claim. And so Pilate isn't concerned about Jewish theology. The term Messiah in most Jewish thinking at the time, and in certainly Roman understanding of Jewish thinking, is that the Messiah is the future anointed one, the King of Israel.
Well, that's the literal meaning of the word Messiah.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, it's the name. Christos is the Greek word. Mashiach is the Hebrew word. It's referring to the king who gets anointed during his coronation ceremony to show that he's the favored one of God.
Yeah, in the recent coronation of King Charles, it was chrism oil that was rubbed on his head and breast.
None of us knew that was going to happen because it's been over 50 years since we've seen any of this.
But so you have this interesting word origin of Christ, Messiah, just means anointed one, and of course this is I suppose Jews at the time would consider the anointed one to be something like an early king of Israel. So they envisioned this Messiah figure not as God.
No, not as God. The Messiah was not God.
But as a political leader. And this is perhaps where some people might stumble. And I remember when I first started considering the idea that Jesus maybe didn't even claim to be God.
Yes.
One of the things that I would think about is all of these times that he would refer to himself as the Messiah, the Son of Man, this kind of thing. And you forget that it's only today that we make these terms synonymous. But at the time, the word Messiah, the term Son of Man, the term Son of God, and the term God are not sort of...
They're not the same thing.
You wouldn't see them next to each other in the
But
thesaurus.
the problem is that I think historically, since all these titles get attributed to Jesus, that he's Messiah, Son of Man, Son of God, Lord, God, all these things, that they all, then people just assume they all are different versions of the same thing. They are not different versions of the same thing. If you ask any Jew living in the first century, you think that person's the Messiah? You mean he's God? They say, what? What do you mean? No, I said he's the Messiah. And so it's like claiming, if you claim to be, the prime minister, you're God. What? And some of your prime ministers definitely have not been God, I can tell you.
So,
Whoa. That is some interesting information right there, Kelly, because I never even fathomed that could be a thing. Because right then and there, he's right. The word Messiah today is synonymous with the word God. I mean, right here on this channel, guys, we're figuring out religion together, guys. We're doing it. We're on a journey ourselves. That's why we're trying to learn as much as possible about Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, all of them, because you need to know about all of them and have an informed decision so that you can communicate effectively with people. And just like he said, the term Messiah was just a political ranking in a sense. It was just, this is the Messiah. It's like the prime minister, the president, the king, whatever. It was not like, hey, this is the Messiah. When we think of Messiah today, we think this is the Son of God. This is God himself. This is the chosen. This is, this high level individual that's a spiritual attunement to the word Messiah. Back then there was no spiritual attunement to the word. Back then it was just a political
term role, but also
political role.
The religion and the politics were so combined at this time, and also you have to realize that the way people practice religion was just, they would go to the temples and there was priests, and essentially priests were essentially seen as a step closer to God than everybody else. They know things that the common people don't know. And to know more about God, you basically just have to go say what the priests are saying at the temple. And that really is the only way. And so for someone to come out and say that essentially just a common person, that they're closer to God than this whole system and this whole structure, it was not very happily taken by the Romans. Of course not.
And so that's why it was basically saying like they killed him for that, for political reasons. Essentially, it was nothing to do with spiritual reasons. And I'm sure it did a little bit, but mostly it was political reasons.
And I think they saw the gathering slowly, and they didn't want the prophecy of the Messiah to come true. I think they had some fear where everybody would essentially end up revolting. Yeah. And they didn't want that. So
I mean, what just an interesting, we're going to even go deeper on this topic. And,
I think it's fascinating.
We only got about 7 minutes in the video. We might actually finish the whole video and do a actual deep dive and a comparison between, because this is very interesting stuff. I need to know what you guys think. Do you guys think that Jesus claimed to be God or not? Because this seems like something that could be just completely written and made up completely, and we don't know. And that's part of the reason why Islam is such an interesting religion, because the stuff that they wrote down, they know what it is. In Christianity, you don't really know. You just have to guess who wrote this. Is it accurate? Is it real?
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. And even as this man begins the conversation, again, things that I don't even know. Of course, we all know the books aren't really it's just a whole thing. But for him to say that the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or at least Matthew and Mark, is almost very similar. And it seems as if they took it from another book, And then we have the book of John, who I guess was the only book that's saying Jesus claimed to be God. But even so, as this man says all these things, these are really just based on theories. And so that's another thing, like when it comes to Christianity, I mean, it's just the text is it's so up in the air, and it just, you can't help but to make it's kind of fluffy when you don't have for sure facts.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
And then anything technically could be made up, you know?
Exactly. So we do know that there was something special with Jesus going on, but to what extent, guys? That's what we're trying to figure out here. And I do believe that we are all sons of God. So to me, it's like if you just single out one person and say, hey, he's the only son of God, no one else. I believe that we all come from God. So we all are a part of God, and we are all the children of God. That's what I personally believe.
I agree. And then, I mean, there's also, the book of Thomas, which is, I read a little bit. I need to finish it. But these are meant to be, this book was not included in the Bible. It's meant to be direct quotes made by Jesus. But I think Khan and I both agree that we see Jesus, everything that he was teaching, at least is what I believe, whatever he said about himself and what he was teaching about himself, I think he was just trying to say, hey, you know how close to God I am? You know what I do? You know how the presence I have? You can be that too if you listen to me and understand what I'm teaching here. It doesn't mean that I am God, but it means that there's a different way to get close to God. And it's within you, and you can be just as close to God as I am. You're also the son of God. Like, I think you're just trying to teach everybody that they could be just like him. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right, Kelly. That's what I believe too, because humans it's like no one knows how connected they are to God, because a lot of people separate themselves from God. And I talk about whenever I healed myself from stage 5 kidney disease, something that you shouldn't be able to heal from. I did it through the power of God, because I had a message where Jesus said, you need to come and work with me and God more. It wasn't like he was coming to me saying, I am a God, do this. It was like an older brother saying, hey, you need to work with God, and you need to listen to me. And through listening to me, work with God. Yeah. And that's what I did. And I let God into my body and into my mind, and knew that wherever God resides, there can only be perfection. So if I just let God into my body, then in a sense, you become one with God, and everything is perfect in your body and in your mind. And it's really that simple. So what an interesting video, an interesting topic. This is the kind of stuff I really love to talk about and discuss. And I love to hear what you guys' opinions are on this, guys. So thank you guys for watching the channel. Thank you for donating just $1, $10 million. It doesn't matter how much, 1 cent. We appreciate it. We see every donation. We love you guys so much. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video.